Julie sat alone in her small, cluttered apartment, the silence pressing in on her from all sides. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room. She stared at the fading light, feeling as though it was taking with it any remnants of hope she might have had. The weight of her depression settled heavily on her chest, making it difficult to breathe. Her brother Jake had called earlier, his voice full of concern. "Julie, you need to talk to someone," he had said. "You can't keep living like this, especially with Dad needing your help now." She had promised him she would, but now, sitting alone in the growing darkness, the thought of reaching out for help seemed impossible. Julie had always been good at hiding her feelings. Growing up in a chaotic household, she learned early on to build walls around herself, to protect herself from the emotional turmoil surrounding her. But now, those walls had become a prison, trapping her in constant emptiness and hopelessness. The added responsibility of caring for her ailing father only intensified her feelings of suffocation and despair. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a text from Emma, a coworker who had taken a particular interest in her well-being. "Hey, Julie, I just wanted to remind you about tomorrow's laughter yoga session. I think it could really help. Hope to see you there." Julie sighed and set the phone down. Laughter yoga. The idea seemed ridiculous, but Emma persisted, and Julie could not refuse her kindness. Besides, a part of her was desperate for anything that might bring a sliver of light into her dark world. The next day, Julie forced herself out of bed and got dressed. She walked to the local coffee shop where she was supposed to meet Emma. As she entered, the smell of freshly brewed coffee and soft chatter greeted her. Emma waved her over to a small table by the window. "I'm so glad you came," Emma said, her smile warm and genuine. "I think you'll enjoy this." Julie managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Emma. I'll give it a try." The yoga session was held in a small community center nearby. The instructor, a middle-aged woman with a serene demeanor, welcomed them warmly. Laughter yoga is about letting go of your inhibitions and finding joy in the simple act of laughing, she explained. It might feel strange at first, but just go with it. As the session began, Julie felt self-conscious and awkward. The laughter felt forced, and she struggled to find joy in the exercises. But as she glanced around the room and saw the genuine smiles on the faces of the others, she began to relax. Her shoulders lowered, and a tentative smile tugged at the corners of her lips. Slowly, she allowed herself to laugh, and to her surprise, she felt a small flicker of warmth in her chest. After the session, Emma invited Julie for a cup of coffee. They sat in the cozy shop, sipping their drinks and talking about the session. "You did great," Emma said, her eyes full of encouragement. "I know it might not seem like much, but little by little, these things can make a difference." Julie nodded, feeling a small glimmer of hope. Her posture straightened, and her eyes seemed a bit brighter. "Thanks, Emma. I appreciate it." As they talked, Julie opened up a bit more about her situation. "It's been tough, Emma. My dad's health is declining, and he needs constant care. It's overwhelming. I feel like I'm drowning." Emma reached across the table and squeezed Julie's hand. "I can't imagine how tough that must be, but you're not alone. Some people care about you and want to help." Julie felt tears well up in her eyes, but blinked them back. It's hard to see any light at the end of the tunnel." She wanted to talk more, but swallowed her words. Emma took a deep breath and looked Julie in the eyes. "You know, I haven't always been this positive. A few years ago, I went through a really tough time. My mom was diagnosed with cancer, and I was her primary caregiver. It was incredibly draining, both physically and emotionally." Julie's eyes widened in surprise. "I didn't know that, Emma. How did you cope?" Emma smiled softly. It wasn't easy. I was falling apart, and a friend dragged me to a laughter yoga session, much like I did with you. I thought it was ridiculous at first, but slowly, the laughter started to break through my walls. It didn't solve everything, but gave me moments of relief and joy that I desperately needed. It helped me to keep going. Julie squeezed Emma's hand. Thank you for sharing that. It means a lot to know I'm not alone in this. One step at a time, Emma said softly. You're already taking the first steps, and that's something to be proud of. That evening, Julie sat in her apartment, reflecting on the day's events. She thought about the laughter, yoga, and her brief moments of connection. It wasn't much, but it was something. Maybe Jake was right. Maybe she did need to talk to someone. Julie went to her father's house the next day to help him with his daily routines. As she entered, she was greeted by the overwhelming smell of antiseptic, mixed with the faint scent of old books. Her father, frail and dependent, sat in his recliner, his eyes dull but filled with a quiet plea. Hi, Dad, Julie said, forcing a smile. How are you feeling today? He grunted, his eyes following her as she moved around the room, gathering supplies to change his dressings. The task was physically and emotionally draining. As she struggled to lift him, he muttered irritably, You're doing it wrong. I'm trying my best, Dad, she replied, her voice shaking. Please, just let me help you. You think this is help? He snapped, his voice rising. You're just like your mother, always getting in the way. The words stung, and Julie felt tears prick her eyes. She finished the task in silence, her hands trembling. The weight of his demands and her own emotional turmoil made her feel like she was suffocating. Later that evening, Jake stopped by the apartment. Julie could see the worry etched on his face the moment he walked in. Julie, we need to talk, Jake said, his tone serious. She sighed, sitting down on the couch. What is it now, Jake? I'm worried about you, he said, sitting beside her. You've been so overwhelmed with Dad, and I can see it's taking a toll on you. I'm fine, Julie insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. I'm managing. No, you're not, Jake said, his frustration evident. You're drowning, and I'm scared for you. You can't keep doing this alone. You need to get help, for your sake and Dad's. Julie's defenses crumbled, and she burst into tears. I don't know what to do, Jake. I'm trying so hard, but it's never enough. Jake wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly. It's okay to admit you need help. We'll figure this out together, okay? You're not alone. Julie nodded, the weight of her burden feeling a little lighter with her brother's support. The next day, Julie made an appointment with Sarah, a therapist recommended by a friend. As she sat in the waiting room, her heart pounded with anxiety. But when Sarah greeted her with a warm smile and led her into her office, Julie felt a sense of calm wash over her. Sarah's office was serene, with calming colors and soft music. Julie sat on the comfortable couch, fidgeting nervously. I don't really know where to start, she admitted. That's okay, Sarah said gently. Start wherever you feel comfortable. Over the next few weeks, Julie opened up to Sarah, sharing her deepest fears and childhood traumas. It started with small disclosures, moments of vulnerability that she had never dared to speak aloud. Gradually, the floodgates opened, and Julie recounted the dark memories that had shaped her. Her father had been a volatile presence, his anger unpredictable and terrifying. Julie remembered the nights she spent hiding under her bed, her small body trembling as she listened to the sound of his yelling and the smashing of objects. The fear had been a constant companion, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. Her mother, overwhelmed and defeated, had retreated into herself, leaving Julie to fend for herself and her younger brother. "I felt like I had to be invisible," Julie confessed one afternoon, her voice barely a whisper. "If he didn't see me, he couldn't hurt me." Sarah listened attentively, her calm presence soothing Julie's raw emotions. "You were just a child," Sarah said gently. "No child should have to live in fear like that." Julie nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, but letting go of that fear is hard. It's like it's part of me." Sarah nodded. "It takes time, Julie, but recognizing it is the first step. We need to work on replacing those old, unhealthy defense mechanisms with healthier ways of coping." Together, they explored techniques to manage her anxiety and fear. Sarah introduced Julie to mindfulness exercises, teaching her to ground herself in the present moment instead of being consumed by past traumas. They practiced deep breathing and visualization, creating safe mental spaces where Julie could retreat when her anxiety flared up. Julie also began to keep a journal, writing down her thoughts and feelings. It was a way to process her emotions, to make sense of the chaos that had been her childhood. Slowly, she began to see patterns in her behavior, recognizing how her past had shaped her present. The laughter yoga sessions with Emma became a lifeline. At first, the laughter felt strange and forced, but Julie genuinely enjoyed the sessions as the weeks passed. The simple act of laughing, of letting go, brought a lightness to her heart that she hadn't felt in years, and the coffee chats with Emma afterward provided a sense of connection and support she had long been missing. One evening, as she sat in her apartment, Julie realized that the silence no longer felt oppressive. She hummed softly as she tidied up, her movements more relaxed. It was still there, but it was no longer suffocating. She had found small moments of joy and connection, and it was enough to give her hope. Jake called, and Julie felt genuinely happy to hear his voice for the first time in a long while. "How are you doing, sis?" he asked. "I'm doing better," she said, and she meant it. "I've been seeing a therapist and doing laughter yoga with a friend. It's helping." "That's great to hear," Jake said, relief evident in his voice. "I'm proud of you, Julie." As she hung up the phone, Julie felt a sense of peace. She knew she still had a long way to go, but for the first time, she felt she was on the right path. She had found support and connection. With that, she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Julie sat back, listening to the sounds of the night outside her window. The silence was still there, but no longer the sound of emptiness. It was the sound of possibility, of hope, and of a future she was ready to embrace.